So, I've taken a bit of a dive into the online representation of anti-doping in the sport of arm wrestling, specifically with the WAF Federation. First, I want to quickly go over a few things I came across that point to the WAF and/or the anti-doping facilities they use as somewhat questionable organisations. Export News, by the way, is an excellent resource for all kinds of information, assuming you can get around the ugly interface and broken English. But the link they presented points to the team main forum, a thread back from 2009 when forums were still a big thing on the internet, with some very interesting figures involved. The thread comments at first on the disqualification of Semerenko, the Ukrainian athlete at the 2009 European Championships in Sofia, Bulgaria, where he tested positive for clenbuterol, so he would not be going to the 2009 WAF World Championships. Then there are a few comments made by, I assume, Americans on the unsurprising nature of this result, judging by his physical appearance mostly and the credibility of his clean status. And then in bursts Engin Terzi. Yes, the Engin Terzi, the Turkish superstar and now the mastermind behind much of arm wrestling as we see it. He gives a wall of text berating these Americans for casting accusations based purely on speculation from behind the safety of a keyboard and across oceans, but do note he's not saying that any of these athletes are clean, just that to accuse them without proof is a silly thing to do. But generally Engin is talking about keeping your mouth shut until concrete proof and judgment has been made about the athlete's doping status. He then brings up how his team, the Turkish athletes, undergo special testing before the actual competition. He says 26 days are just under a month out of competition. All athletes heading to that competition are tested before going. Now, it is important to note that he doesn't say he is tested by the WAF. If it's anything like weightlifting, and I assume many other sports, these tests are done and kept in-house to make sure that only the athletes who will pass the actual tests, if they receive them at the competition, are sent to the competition. Does this mean only clean athletes are sent to tested competitions? On paper, yes. Assuming it works, there are no currently positively testable athletes headed to the competition. But as you probably all know by now, made clear by the fact that anti-doping doesn't only test for active compounds in the system, but also tests for metabolites, which are essentially just leftover traces of these compounds having been present at some point in time. This just means that the athletes have been cleaned enough to be appearingly clean. You see it in a lot of sports. Right up until competition, an athlete is doing amazingly well in training, and then at some period just before competition they get mysteriously injured and can't take part in that competition. But what's the point? Why do you need them to seem clean at the competition? It's random testing, so the chance an athlete can just blast you around and get lucky and pass through blasting tren, win and emerge untested. Well, Engin reveals the issue here. We have our last doping test 15 to 20 days before the departure to WAF or EAC, and then we are again subject to be tested also at where we compete, if we become a medalist. So there will be another test if the athlete begins to do too well, so that attempt at lucking your way to victory starts to collapse. And then we compound that with this by Alexander Pozhnyakov. All the perks that elite Russian pullers might be getting from their local government and sponsors would disappear and never come back if one fails a test. For these athletes, the sport is their life. They do it full time. They cannot fall back on their banking, factory or teaching jobs. Their distinguished sports titles are given by the order of Minister of Sports in Moscow. They are truly famous as world champions in skiing, wrestling, diving, chess or any other sport would be. Entire Turkish team would be banned if someone fails. This is why testing is being done in Turkey and Russia on national levels. So, just like in all sports, it's not so much an issue of the athlete being clean or not as an individual. It comes down to the overall representation of the athlete, team, coaches and training systems within that network that anti-doping gatekeeps. So you could blast tren up until competition and then win, and if you didn't pick any random card to be tested, there's no problem, and everybody wins except the person you beat. But for the mandatory testing for the top-tier athletes, the medalists, the people who have eyes, sponsorship and money on them, the chances of that same athlete, if they are blasting through, testing positive are high, if not certain, given the standard rules. So somewhere along the line, within many sports, a kind of perhaps unwritten agreement has been set up so that until this point in time, say 1 month out from competition, athletes can do whatever they want to. But then the country needs to filter out the athletes, so whoever does go to competition does not test positive, either because they have never doped or because they have managed to clean themselves enough for a podium. This way the athletes win, the countries win, the sponsors win, and the sport and anti-doping system get to say they are playing nicely, and that anybody who does end up testing positive was to the outside world an outlier, who broke all the rules. They are probably not affiliated with an official team, but in effect to the integrity of the institutions within the sport does relatively little damage. It's a system with rules hidden inside the exposed rules, and this seems to work fairly well for all involved. In theory at least, because this is where the real corruption begins. So this post, which I think is a report from armsport.ru or WAF, but I can't find the original version, so be a little skeptical from this point on. Report from Doping Committee. We do 20 tests at the world level and 30 tests at the European level for a total of 50 tests per year. To date we have done 200 tests and have had 15 positive. 7 from Russia, 1 from Slovakia, 1 from Brazil, 2 from Latvia, 1 from Romania, 1 from Bulgaria, 1 from Uzbekistan, and 1 from Ukraine. Please note that all tests are conducted by luck of the draw. To which Engin replies, I have never heard anyone tested positive from Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Uzbekistan, Brazil, and Latvia. At least never heard them being suspended. Who are these athletes? 2006 WAF champion from Kazakhstan in 198 tested positive, but he is not listed above. So this suggests that the WAF are releasing information about results without details of the results. So either these positive results are false, or results are being suppressed regarding the details, which according to the 2015 WADA code, which WAF are supposedly enforcing, is a breach of contract. Article 14.31. The identity of any athlete or other person who is asserted by an anti-doping organization to have committed an anti-doping rule violation may be publicly disclosed by the anti-doping organization with the results management responsibility only after notice has been provided to the athlete or other person. So this means that any athlete or person decided to be guilty by the agency of a doping violation can be made public at this stage if the agency wants to, but only after the athlete or person has been told about it. But this also means the agency can decide not to publicly report the identity of the athlete in question. So this means that if there is a positive doping result in, say, Georgia, there is no requirement for the anti-doping agency to disclose whether it's Levan Sagnishvili, Gennady Kvikvinia, Georgi Rostomashvili, or any other Georgian athlete. So what does this mean? Well, it means that whatever you do see in regards to anti-doping is very possibly not at all the actuality of anti-doping. This built-in ability to report or not report externally the result of testing, combined with the proclivity for people to be corrupt, invites very quickly the chances of bribing to cover results, if, for example, Georgia wanted to hide its positive tested athlete's identity, and inversely allows the anti-doping organization to blackmail countries and athletes to pay for their names to be concealed, or coerced into performing one way or another in competition because another country paid another bribe. Whenever an organization puts up a barrier to some valued object, they do not put the barrier there simply for a more fair access to it. This is exactly what has been revealed to be the case with the IWF, the International Weightlifting Federation, through the McLaren report, which investigated and revealed how they have been controlling and manipulating athlete doping results and access to the sport. The entire system has been outed as corrupt from top to bottom, filled with bribes and pay-to-play style systems. Why would this be limited to weightlifting? They use WADA, the same anti-doping system as the WAF does. And the previous post then also listed the results from the 2004 World Championships in Brazil, which was taken from the WAF results on armsport.ru, showing a large number of disqualified athletes, all Russians in first place. To which Engin comments, I am not sure if they are punished by the main WAF for these disqualifications at all, as they kept pulling the following year, so I don't know exactly the situation. But this disqualification decision is not honoured by the WAF that continues to organise WAF championships. So remember this, specifically the part about athletes being supposedly disqualified but continuing to compete in the same federation unpunished, while we move on to the next topic. A post on vk.com in 2020 by Yerkin Alimzhanov, who you may or may not have heard of. He is an older Kazakhstan athlete, a very successful one too, who trains with, and I assume coaches or at least advises, Alimzhanov, that other Kazakh monster who has also been suspended from the WAF in 2018, but should be set to return this year. Dear friends, athletes, amateurs and fans of arm wrestling, I would like to draw our attention to one case that occurred during the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic with the arm wrestlers of Kazakhstan, Vali Farajev and Alijan Muratov. On March 27, 2020, WAF posted on its website unpleasant and incomprehensible information that Vali Farajev was temporarily suspended according to preliminary result of a doping control test at 2017 World Cup in Hungary. Alimzhanov was temporarily suspended according to preliminary tests at the 2018 World Cup in Turkey. Moreover, all information was posted behindhand, meaning late or slow, after a few years after receiving the results of doping control tests. The responsible anti-doping organization presented by WAF does not provide any explanation on this fact. According to Article 17 of the World Anti-Doping Code of 2015, no anti-doping rule violation proceeding may be commenced against an athlete or other person unless he or she has been notified of the anti-doping rule violation as provided in Article 7. Article 7 of the World Anti-Doping Code provides for the processing of results and the entire algorithm of actions when receiving test results, which require, first of all, immediate notification of athletes about the results of a test, to provide an opportunity for appeal. On this fact, all the norms of the code by WAF have not been complied with, or the rights of arm wrestling athletes have been violated. During the COVID-19 pandemic, none of the guys had the opportunity to appeal or protest the illegal publication on the site. Also, we were always worried about the lack of reliable information on the WAF website. According to the WAF constitution, the second language is Russian. Information has the right to be published in Russian. Many countries of the post-Soviet period still communicate in Russian. Dear arm wrestlers of the world and all concerned people, who has the opportunity to bring this information to WADA? This is a violation of the rights of all athletes. Today Farajev and Muratov, tomorrow anyone will be in their place. Thus they can disqualify any athlete, removing competitors and the objectionable. Victory is not obtained in this way. Victory is gained through training and at the table. I ask all concerned to pay attention to this. So this seemed like a pretty concerning post, and if it holds any ground, speaks quite poorly of the fairness and objective openness of the anti-doping arms of the WAF, or perhaps any anti-doping agency across all domains. If one apple is rotten, then chances are it isn't the only one in the tree. From the most recent suspended athlete list on the WAF website, Vali Farajev is not actually to be found, despite having been mentioned previously in a preliminary test by the WAF on their site. So that could mean his second test did not return positive or other forces acted in his favour. Alizhan Muratov, however, is listed on the WAF website currently, having been suspended until this year. The compound listed there and the competition he is said to have been found positive within is 2018, which aligns with the public disclosure, although the compound listed trenbolone, or more precisely trenbolone metabolites, indicating the use of trenbolone in some period before the competition, is quite bizarre, and very out of line with Kazakhstan's traditional go-to chemical assistance choices. He also continued competing after 2018, so after testing positive, unless they were able to find lingering trenbolone metabolites in his system during a test done in 2020 and decided this was from use back in 2018. So either he was told and continued competing in WF competitions without any punishment, or he was not told until 2 years after the incident, which, as Yerkin Alimzhanov said, would be against the WADA and the WF constitution, so a breach of the athlete's rights. Well, I'm going to have to cut this here. It's gone on for a while, and the whole list of athletes with their choice of chemicals to be suspended for will take even longer. So I'll get to that next time. But for this, none of this is concretely certain. It's only a narrative threaded through bits of information here and there. But the fact that these individual bits of information exist in places, at least, points to the possibility of this being an issue. Otherwise, we are done for today. You know the drill. Bomb my comments, let me know how terrible and wrong I am, or how you feel about this particular incident. So just get the algorithm pumped and enhanced. Maybe this even helps to expose corruption in the sport if it's there. But I'll see you later.